The Carolina Panthers drafted Xavier Legette with the last pick in round 1, but here's why you should be selling him in your dynasty leagues.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Magdziuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. And it's a Wednesday episode, so of course that means Matt Williamson is here. Follow him on Twitter at Williamson NFL. Go check out his new YouTube channel as well. On today's show, we are answering your Twitter questions about the NFL draft. And our first one is about Xavier Legette, who I think a lot of people thought was going to be maybe a second, maybe fall to the end of the second round. He goes into the first round of the Carolina Panthers. Matt, how excited are we about Xavier Legette in Dynasty now that he lands with Bryce Young and the Panthers?
Well, I think there's an overriding lesson to be learned, or at least to experience or think about, is right after the NFL draft, everyone's super excited, and I'm just saying everyone overreacts in the Dynasty community right this week. So it's a great time to pounce on some guys that went to, quote, bad landing spots, or it's a great time to sell guys that went to, quote, great landing spots, because we know that stuff changes very rapidly in the league. I like Legette. I mean, I respect the big, strong, fast archetype, and I do think his late breakout age worries me a little, but it was quite the breakout, So, I mean, I think he's a good complement to Diontae Johnson. But this isn't even really a knock on him. I would be real interested in trading him right now if I had him, just because I don't trust that organization at all. I don't love Bryce Young as a quarterback. Didn't when he came out. I understand that they put more resources on offense around him to at least give him a chance, and I respect that from a franchise standpoint. It's just, when in doubt, I'm going to sell Panthers.
Kate, what do you think?
I think that's a pretty good philosophy here, at least the current era of the Carolina Panthers that we're in. Now, on yesterday's show, we talked about Jonathan Brooks, and I kind of made the case that I don't hate Jonathan Brooks as much as maybe Marcus does, because Marcus really, really just took a sucker punch to the gut when the Panthers submitted their pick there. But
I did. Well, because he could have had a top 5 dynasty running back. Instead,
he could have been. He's not, but I still think he's a top 15 dynasty running back. And I think from that perspective, you mentioned the team building perspective. Like, I respect what the Panthers did with very limited resources, with their ability to try to rebuild or start the rebuilding process here around Bryce Young. Respect all of that. But I do think Xavier Legette lost a lot more value going to the Panthers for me than Jonathan Brooks, the running back, because at least Brooks, I know I can manufacture touches for Brooks. I know he's going to be the outlet option. But I do think, generally speaking, Diontae Johnson probably profiles as more of the every down possession receiver than Legette does. And if Legette went into a situation where he could automatically become alpha and he's forced into a significant target share, I think that would have been great for his value. But I think Diontae Johnson has the edge for more volume in this situation, whereas Legette, I think they're planning to utilize him more in ways that don't necessarily, they aren't conducive to a very high floor.
Matt, I'll say one of my biggest fears is, doesn't it seem like Jonathan Mingo, who the Panthers drafted early in the second round last year, and Xavier Legette are a little bit redundant?
A little bit. Yeah, big after the catch guys, physical, raw.
Probably need to be slot guys.
Probably need to be power slots, yeah. I also don't think Mingo is worth anything at this point. I was holding out hope for him a little bit and thinking I could buy him super, super low. And I did even months ago. I mean, just throw-ins on deals. Now you hope he gets traded for a 7th-round pick and goes somewhere else,
So the only reason I'm not completely out on Xavier Legette is because the price wasn't very expensive to begin with. Going into the month of April, he was being drafted as wide receiver 10 among the rookies. That's like the back end of the second round of your rookie drafts, your non-super flex rookie drafts. How much could his value even really drop from that point? Because when I look at the names that are going after him, or that were going after him, Roman Wilson, Tez Walker, Javon Baker, Jalen McMillan, none of those guys have first-round draft capital. And I know that all those other guys are in not great situations either. Why shouldn't I just gamble on the guy that clearly the Panthers loved, that they felt like they needed to trade up from 33 to 32 to go get him? Why not just gamble on a guy that had elite production in the SEC?
So I'm going to change my answer then. I mean, because if you compare him to the Roman Wilsons of the world, he's worth way more than that. I just assumed since the draft, he was going to go in the Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey neighborhood.
I mean, so let's go through the ADP right now. It's Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy as 5. This is, again, going into the draft.
Okay, right.
Troy Franklin, wide receiver 6. I got a feeling that one's going to change a little bit. Ladd McConkey, wide receiver 7. A.D. Mitchell, wide receiver 8. Keon Coleman, wide receiver 9. And then Xavier Legette, wide receiver 10. I mean, I think you can move him up at least one spot there, right?
I think I'd move him ahead of Mitchell, considering what happened on draft day, and Franklin.
Okay. Kate, what about you?
Same. I think that's fair. I will say, Matt, I got a little spicy with my Ladd McConkey. I moved Ladd McConkey all the way up to wide receiver 4. So
I think I will too, to be honest with you.
He's definitely in a very different tier than Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey is literally just the only wide receiver in my 3rd tier at this point. But
we're going to talk about the guys that we like on day 2. So, okay, we're going to talk about your guy Ladd. So don't worry about that. But I think my point is the ADP is reasonable now with Xavier Legette. However, I think when I get to that stage of the second round, I'm probably just not drafting a wide receiver there. I probably would rather draft running backs, and maybe that's where you can get your quarterbacks in your non-super flex drafts. He's probably just not somebody that I'm going to, even though the price is fair, that I'm going to be all that interested in drafting over the summer. Is that fair for you, Matt?
So I think we need some context here. ADP is always really hard this week because it's in the process of changing rapidly.
Correct.
And most of us haven't had our rookie drafts, but we're about to. So I do think that that the numbers might not back up the hype around him right now. Because I feel like if I had a rookie draft today, he would go before I would pick him, and I'd be like, I'm glad he's off the board. And he would have went 3 or 4 spots before I would have picked him, So most of us aren't in the situation where you've been holding him and you can dump him right now. It's just more like how you said, where does he start going in rookie drafts? And I think that'll be more evident to us in a couple of weeks. And my hunch is it's going to be too high.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about our favorite fits on day 2 of the NFL draft when it comes to wide receivers, because there were a couple that we really, really liked. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer that it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Save on last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minutes for sports, concert, comedy, and theater events near you. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, our next question is, Matt, who is your favorite, let's call it day 2, wide receiver fit landing spot prospect?
Well, I think Kate's pretty high on McConkey. So that's my number 1 as well. So I don't want to get too far into that, but I'm going to kind of not avoid the question, but I really like Jalen Polk and I love Drake May. And I know we talked about this a lot, that Patriots is the dead zone. I mean, that's the Dead Sea. You definitely don't want anybody from the Patriots, but it's a whole new regime. I mean, maybe we can get Patriots on the cheap. I thought Polk was worth the 37th pick overall. I still think May's going to be a bargain, especially in super flexes. Can we get in on the ground floor on rookie Patriots with everyone thinking it's Mac Jones in the Belichick era where they're going to have this dreadful offense?
I think that's a good call. Okay, what about you?
I think that's a great call. I'm also not going to talk about Lad McConkey. Like, I feel like I've beaten him with a dead horse, something about a dead horse. I feel like the dead horse is involved in some way, but I do want to shout out Malachi Corley, who I think probably has the most underrated landing spot among all of the day 2 picks. You looked at this draft, the Jets were widely kind of rumored to be in the Brock Bowers conversation to get a second playmaker here for Aaron Rodgers. Malachi Corley is 100% going to be that guy for the Jets. And like, make no mistake, the profile, you can look coming out of a smaller program, the way he was utilized, it was, very close to the line of scrimmage, reliant very highly on the yards after the catch ability, which he's absolutely great at. You can go back and watch our Malachi Corley preview. Talked a lot about that yak ability, talked a lot about yards after the contact, which I think is his most impressive quality. And that's what reminds me most of like a Deebo Samuel prospect. I think looking at kind of the body type, the potential utilization, you have a head coach here with the Jets who is very familiar with the 49ers and the way they use Deebo Samuel historically. I wouldn't be surprised if we see, Garrett Wilson playing that typical X spot, but seeing them get really creative in generated touches for Malachi Corley. I mean, he's got, it was a first pick of the 3rd round. This, I think, is an ideal landing spot where he might see immediate volume. There's no tight ends that we really have to worry about being significant focuses in the passing game. You have Breece Hall, but it's kind of Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall and a questionable Mike Williams who hasn't been able to stay healthy, and he's coming off a torn ACL. Like, I think Malachi Corley is the wide receiver 2 in the Jets offense.
Matt, what do you think about Malachi?
That's great. I hadn't thought of it from that angle, especially if you only get 7 or 8 games out of Williams. By that point, too, could Corley be your deep threat? Just run goes down the sidelines in addition to the manufactured stuff. And Kate, as you were saying that, I was thinking, let's look at this through Aaron Rodgers' eyes. We know who's in charge here. Early career Randall Cobb. I mean,
that was Marcus's comp.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
The
Okay.
Pre-draft was Randall Cobb, who started as a kick returner and then kind of eventually worked his way into the slot guy. And then kind of as his career progressed, they put him in the backfield and they would give him carries there. Why couldn't he do a similar thing right away?
Absolutely. Jet sweeps and manufactured touches and all those things. Real quick, while we're on this topic, though, Jermaine Burton's going to be on a lot of my teams. I'm real happy with where he landed. I mean, and the draft capital. I think he's a phenomenal talent. Higgins isn't going to stand in his way long. I think he's going to be on a lot of my teams in the second round.
And yeah, that's the guy I had picked as well. Like I
Right.
really like Jermaine Burton's talent. Would I have drafted him on day 2? Probably not. Like there's a lot of questions there, but the fact that he was drafted on day 2, the Bengals clearly liked him. Now you might have to wait a little bit. I think he is going to be productive as a rookie, but I think we're going to see obviously Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I think they're going to use the tight ends a little bit more this year after signing Mike Gesicki. But if you can just wait 1 year, because I think everybody agrees, like T. Higgins is not going to be on this team in 2025. No. Jermaine Burton is going to be, I mean, I think he could end up being the biggest steal of all these guys because you're going to have him attached to, I think, a good offense and a really, really good quarterback. And I think his skill set just fits really, really well with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow.
Tell me if I'm having take lock here because I know he got the draft capital, right? But I still keep going back to these pre-draft concerns about immaturity, which, like, to be clear, he wasn't one of the youngest receivers in this class. He's about to turn 23. Like, I don't like to see immaturity concerns from a 23-year-old grown man. There were a lot of concerns about the coaching staff, right? He got recruited to top programs around the country. And Marcus, you can, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but you mentioned that
Georgia and Alabama were happy that he left.
Yes.
That's basically,
like
high schools were too. Yeah.
Yep.
They were clearly happy to have him initially, which the Bengals seemed very happy to have him. But once he got in the building, they were happy for him to depart. And I think that speaks like big red flag problems to me, in addition to some of the other incidents that have followed him through his career. I think Jermaine Burton might be, like, from a situational standpoint, from a talent standpoint, one of the best values, but I keep going back to the guy, not the prospect, the guy. And I'm just wondering, like,
I feel good that he landed with the Bengals, who have a history of dealing with.
That's part of it for me too.
Yeah. Well, and
they love themselves a little.
I do think having Joe Burrow there does really help. Like, you go to a quarterback in the locker room that seems like, I mean, it's a pretty veteran locker room there, especially on the, actually on both sides of the ball. We'll see. Matt, we've had
real quick. I think the character concerns, Kate, though, are also baked into his price. I mean, if he was clean, we wouldn't be having these conversations about you could get him with a mid-second round pick or a late second round pick. I think he's right there with like the Brian Thomases of the world.
I'm still kind of surprised that, I mean, he went as high as he did, and he got that day 2 draft capital. And again, the Bengals are not fearsome in delving into that poll. To this point, it's worked out, but again, this is probably a guy that, like, I think from a situational standpoint, from a talent perspective, like, would you like him on your team? Yes. But he's also probably a guy that in this pool of wide receivers that I think there are a lot of really safe, high floor options in this kind of similar tier. Like, I'm going to just let him be somebody else's problem. Maybe I'll have a couple of shares when all of my dynasty rookie drafts are in the books, but I'm not warming up to Jermaine Burton as much as consensus seems to be.
I have to ask you, Matt, really quickly about Roman Wilson, who landed on your Steelers and your Steelers, Kate. I can't believe I'm doing a podcast with 2 Steelers fans. That's okay.
We got him.
Matt, what did you think of Roman Wilson landing with Pittsburgh?
He was mocked often at 51 in the second round of the Steelers, which I thought was way too rich because he's small, as we know, and he always will be, but he really struggles against press man coverage right now. He has work to do in that regard. A lot of his catches and touches are manufactured with pre-snap motion. But his mentality fits around here much, much better than like a Deontay Johnson. He wants to block. He's aggressive. I think there will be a veteran addition to this team, hopefully. I mean, we're getting down to nitty-gritty a little bit here. They're starting to run out of options, but I think he'll be the slot when it's all said and done. I don't know if Calvin Austin will be back. I'm not worried about Van Jefferson or Quez Watkins. They're just guys. I think he'll go ahead of all them.
Kate?
I love the fit. I think he just seems like he has black and gold blood. But what I really like about Roman Wilson, I do think he's going to project to the slot. I think what is very unique about him, though, is that he's not just a sort of short target, intermediate target slot. I think he can be like a deep range threat down the seam, and I think from a slot receiver, like he has probably one of the highest upsides among some of the slot receivers that we've seen come out, just because of his speed, athleticism, and ability in the deep game. Like I don't think he's just a guy that profiles as a slot volume type of receiver. So I think the fit is interesting. I think, the only question for me is more so the trajectory of this offense in general. They want to run the ball. They want to control the ball. Might not be conducive to a ton of volume for Roman Wilson, but I think from a landing spot perspective, like he's a guy I'm going to have on a lot of my rosters.
All right, let's talk about Bo Nix and Michael Penix. Which one are you buying for your dynasty leagues? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause for a second to tell you more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. You guys have already talked about that in the past, but there's just so much good stuff in this game that we've got to tell you about. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more that you win together, the more awesome prizes that you unlock. And there's so much to get, like unique stickers that you can trade with your friends, the complete albums for even bigger prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and these hilarious emojis that you can taunt your friends with. It's absolutely amazing. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton of them include their own mini games like digging for treasure. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are answering your Twitter questions with Matt Williamson and Kate Magdziuk. Our last one here, Matt. Who would you rather have in your Superflex leagues going forward, Bo Nix or Michael Penix?
So I thought about this a lot, and to me, it's almost like, would you rather have Derek Carr or Justin Fields? Like one's, a starter. I think Nix and Carr are going to be starters. I mean, I know Carr is. I think Nix will be the opening day starter for Denver, and you're happy to have him in Superflex because there's only so many quarterbacks to go around, and you probably start him almost every week, and he's fine, but he doesn't win you the league. He just keeps you afloat. Where Penix, to me, the best days are yet to come, and you just have to wait. And I don't know that he has Fields' upside. That might not be the best comparison, but the best of the backup quarterbacks in the league, Penix, to me, is going to be right at the top of that list. So if I have the Cars of the world on my team, I want Penix. If I'm hurting to find a starter, I want Nix.
Kate?
I think that's a fair way to approach it. Although I'm just going to say, like, I'm going to give the edge here to Bo Nix, who I just think from a mobility standpoint and like, not necessarily going to be the pinnacle of his game, but we've seen, his willingness to utilize his legs as an athlete. You have not seen that from Michael Penix. He ran a 4.46 40-yard dash, something in that range at his pro day, and everybody was floored. But the thing is, we really haven't seen him utilize his legs whatsoever. So from a game perspective, from a fantasy cheat code standpoint, you've got to give Bo Nix the edge. I think he's going to see the field a lot sooner. You love the fact that like this is Sean Payton's guy and he's actually invested. Like he was not invested in helping Russell Wilson succeed. I do think he's got a personal now he's got his own stake, right? He's got a stake in Bo Nix's path to success and making that work because his job depends on it. And you love the pairing with Troy Franklin. You love the familiarity of a target that, these two connected. Like it was a perfect connection at Oregon. And you can kind of use that as a blueprint for how you want to utilize Troy Franklin in this offense. Sure, the defenses might look a little different. Maybe you want to diversify his route tree, but like the blueprint, the connection is all there. I think all of these things are going to set Bo Nix up for maybe some more immediate fantasy value. And I don't know. I just don't understand. And again, this kind of comes back to not understanding the pick in the first place, but like, what is the path out for Kirk Cousins? And I think that is, I'm having trouble seeing the path out. And maybe that's what is holding me up for Penix just in general. Because I can't, what's the pathway to him having a starting job?
All right, man, I want to ask you this question. Which quarterback do you think landed in a better long-term situation? Is it Penix, playing in a dome in the NFC South with those weapons, or is it going with a quarterback guru like Sean Payton?
I mean, Kate touched on this, and I've talked about to no end on Peacock and Williamson. I don't understand the pick at all from Atlanta, and I think it's a really bad NFL draft pick. And I'm always in favor of, hey, quarterbacks trump everything, but this just makes no sense from a team building, a locker room perspective. I've heard the examples of Alex Smith was in place and Mahomes is tearing up the scout team, and everyone in the locker room's like, I know who the better player is. I mean, that could happen here. I mean, you're like setting a bomb off in your locker room. But that being said, if Penix can get on the field within 2 years, he's in a better spot. But the world changes so much in 2 years. I'm going to go with Nix just because I know he's going to play.
We don't really have any comps to this. Like I'm trying to think of this is
not Jordan Love. It's not Aaron Rodgers.
No, it's not Troy Aikman and Steve Walsh, where those guys were, picked in the same year with first round selections, but it's a really unique situation. I tend to lean Bo Nix because if Sean Payton doesn't get this right, let's say Bo Nix is a bust, or let's say he's just a mediocre quarterback. I can't imagine that he's going to stick around to be able to draft another one, right? Like if the Russell Wilson experience didn't go well and the Bo Nix experience doesn't go well, do you really think the ownership is going to allow him to take a third quarterback? Probably not. I think there's a lot riding on Sean Payton here. So that's why I probably would take Nix, but I don't feel great about it. Like I don't have a lot of conviction about it. Is that fair?
No, but I do from the very least, he is a starter, right? That day one he is going to have a job. Where's Michael Penix? Like I've seen him go, in the second round in a super flex draft, but barring another season-ending injury from Kirk Cousins, I think you have to just hold him for 2 seasons. And then he's 25 26 season. Yeah. And you still have no idea what you have. I do think this is like, the more we're having this conversation, Bo Nix and Bo Nix and Bo Nix, like it's all Bo Nix. And it's not even because I'm excited about Bo Nix, but I do think, especially I with the way that Sean Payton where he's at with his trajectory with this Broncos team, I do think that like metaphorically, all of his eggs are in Bo Nix's basket right now. And he's got more motivation than ever to try to make something work.
All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, we're going to be looking at the biggest veteran winners coming out of the 2024 NFL draft. So make sure you tune in for that. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Go follow Matt on Twitter at Williamson NFL. Go check out his new YouTube channel as well. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.